The word protracted is not suitable to describe the war in this land, while no one can say when the bloodshed will end, and this war, it seems, pushes all in a merciless battle. Revolutionary armed forces and the regular army, urban rebels and self-defense groups, hired assassins and illegal armed groups, foreign mercenaries, saboteurs, CIA and drug enforcement agency. Today, Colombia is on fire. To understand how people managed to survive in this monstrous war, you need to visit this country yourself.
It is the only country in South America with access to both the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, providing a unique vantage point for trading and transportation, while its land border and neighboring trade potential include Panama to the northwest, Venezuela and Brazil to the east, and Ecuador and Peru in the south.
Having read a lot of information about the situation in Colombia, having listened to the views of civilians and diplomatic observers history of this country, you can see the superficial nature of the country's problem. The Colombian conflict is one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of our time, between the rebels of the group Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, and the government of the country. In Colombia, the conflict has continued for half a century, 50 years. There is no exact date of this beginning because it has been spreading for a long time, since 1920. Most researchers agree that the Black Stripe terror in Colombia began on the 9th of April in 1948 with the assassination of left-liberal politician Jorge Gaitan, who, according to all forecasts, was to win the presidential election in 1949. Everyone was waiting for the beginning of transformation from Gaitan, which had to significantly reduce the degree of social and political tension in the country. His murder sparked massive popular uprising against the government of conservative Mario Perez, who was charged by the crowd in the organization of this crime. The subsequent period, called Violencia, has become one of the bloodiest in the history of Colombia. According to various estimates, it claimed between 200 and 300,000 lives. It began as an armed confrontation between supporters of the two ruling parties. The political conflict almost immediately acquired an acute social character. The greatest controversy has reached incandescence between the oligarchs and peasants. Colombian authorities actively use mass repression against the civilian population, simultaneously turning a blind eye to the excesses of groups of mercenaries. Being under the double yoke, the peasantry is gradually becoming more explosive. The uprising in Bogota in 1948 was merely a pretext for the beginning of the struggle for their rights across the country. Dissatisfaction with the regime has long been ripe in the depths of the Colombian society, particularly among the most disadvantaged part of the population, and any occasion was enough to start mass action. The fact that it took such a radical form is due to the final disappointment of the masses in their own government. The murder of Gaitan put a cross on trying to solve the acute social and political problems by constitutional means, so the opposition took up arms. Without waiting for any reforms from above, peasant self-defense groups have refused to demobilize and continue to operate after the Violencia. In the period from 1953 to 1957, in the departments of Cauca, Tolima and Huila emerged self-governing peasant settlement. The government has tried by all means to eliminate the independent peasant republic, but self-defense groups have actively resisted to government army, and the forces were unequal. Barely recovered from Violencia, the villagers were again forced to leave their homes and go into the jungles with guns, fleeing from pursuing their military units and private landlords. The largest public response struck Mark Italia, 27th of May 1964, during the presidency of Guillermo Valencia, began the military operation, the aim of which was to eliminate the independent peasant republic. This operation was part of a more general plan, security operations in Latin America. After the Operation Marquetalia by government forces launched the third phase of civil resistance. From the perfectly prepared by Valencia frames begin to form revolutionary rebel army. In 1964, the Colombian radicalized students studying in Cuba formed the National Liberation Army, or ELN. 2 years later, former members of Marquetalia created the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC. Both of these organizations have survived to the present day, having gone through the Cold War and refusing to demobilize in September 1999, when the continuation of the armed struggle gave other insurgent groups. As you can see, at the time of formation of leftist armed opposition, there was no talk about any targeted revolutionary terror. It must be remembered that the only possibility of survival for the revolutionary rebel armies of Colombia was the creation of positive self-image among the masses. Any unjustified repression against peaceful civilians would have caused irreparable damage to their reputation and consequently the whole cause of the revolution. Much lawfulness could speak of class terror wearing a spontaneous and, most importantly, the nature of response.
Here we go.
The main causes of the conflict are the ideological, social and crime, drug trafficking. FARC earns money in two ways. The first, kidnapping, for which you want to buy them, and patronage, drug traffickers. FARC operates in Colombia, Venezuela, Panama and Ecuador. Colombia against the National Liberation Army. The main causes of this conflict are ideological and crime. ELA appeared in Colombia in 1965. In the wake of the popularity of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. The conflict with the authorities of the country began in 1978. This is a Marxist terrorist organization operating mainly in urban areas. ELA is engaged in killings and kidnappings. ELA has long received support from Cuba, the government of Colombia, and from the United States. Since 1990, more than 10,000 people have been killed or injured by anti-personnel mines in Colombia. FARC and ELN have established minefields on the area of about 100 square kilometers. Since 2000, the loss from mine explosions in Colombia ranged from 1,300 to 550 a year.
Vemos que nos falta centros de salud, nos falta educación, no tenemos agua potable, no queda de otra sino tomar agua del río porque la sequía, a pesar de que tenemos tanto río y tanto afluentes, no tenemos ningún acueducto, no tenemos la energía eléctrica.
Chocó is located on Colombia's Pacific coast.
Since 2002, violence in the country has declined considerably, with some paramilitary groups disbanded in the peace process, and the guerrillas have lost control of the most territory they once controlled. Colombia has achieved a significant reduction in the cocaine production, which allowed the director of Bureau for Combating Drug Trafficking USA, Kilikovsky, declare that Colombia is no longer the largest producer of cocaine. At the same time, the US is still the world's largest consumer of drugs. Currently, in Colombia, a third of the population live in poverty, even though Colombia is a rich country. Gold, silver, emeralds, coal, oil and natural gas are mined here. Nowadays, in some areas of Colombia, there are firefights with insurgents. For example, in the town of Toribio, home to 17,000 people, are constantly dying civilians, and local authorities can't do anything against the guerrillas. What is the reason that terrorism has become an integral part of Colombia's international image? Quite simply, the violent suppression of dissent by the authorities and their reluctance to notice the long-standing problems have led to a response from population, which is not willing to put up with the status quo. Attempts to impose a military solution or create an alternative to the rebels also have failed. Today, the Colombian authorities, with the services of the US, is trying to present the situation as a full-scale fight against international terrorism, justifying our impotence in addressing key social issues. This means that the insurgency will be replenished and the vicious circle of violence will not be broken. In this conflict, all are at fault. They act voluntarily or by coercion, because of poverty or because of their own greed. Therefore, I strongly doubt that in Colombia someday will be peace. Why? Because for 50 years we have a plurality of parallel power structures. Perhaps negotiations ever be successful and be able to sign a peace treaty. But I'm not sure that this document will help to put an end to drug trafficking, illegal mining, power struggles and corruption. That is why I doubt that they will ever lay down their arms. But so far this hasn't happened yet. In the crossfire is the entire population of Colombia.